So why don't we go together through the steps of the SEM process and have a look at the input file and at the output file for one model. And in fact, let's be quite fancy about it and actually do a path analysis which also includes mediated paths. So let's say we have the following research question. Do marital stress and conflict translate into heightened child externalizing problems by impacting on a mother's sense of parental competence? So now that we have a research question, we would probably want to draw a diagram, and in that case it would look like this. These would be the variables, and you would need some arrows going from stress and conflict to perceived parenting competence, and from parenting competence to child externalizing problems as well. And then we would also have some direct effects perhaps. So let's have a go and set up the input file. So what I have here now is the input file which I have opened on the left-hand side of the screen, in the folder with my various files here. Of note is the data file. If I open it with a software for text files such as Notepad, it looks like this. It only has numbers in it, and that's important. So I'm going to keep it open on the right hand side so I can later show you how I link the input file and the data file together. Right, so now I have the two files open. Note that the input file was open with the Mplus editor, whereas the data file was not open with Mplus as a software, it was opened with a text reader. So what does the input file contain? First, it has a title command. Underneath this title command, or within this section, you can write anything you want. So for example, I wrote here a set of possible research questions. Next down is the data command. This is where you link the dataset to the input file, so Mplus knows how to extract the data. To do this, you have to say file is, and then you have to put the name of the file, .dat in this case. And then at the end you have to close with a semicolon. Note that Mplus doesn't care whether you use caps lock or uppercase versus lowercase when you write things. So there is no reason specifically why I would have put these in uppercase, but then this word in lowercase. However, I use it strategically. I always use uppercase for the things that are meant to be written as is, so specifically with keywords, and then I use lowercase for the things that I choose how to write, such as the names of my variables. Whenever a command finishes, you have to close with a semicolon. Now, I mentioned that the data file would be linked using this statement. However, this is only the case if your data file is in the same folder as the input file. If it is in a different folder, you would have to write the entire path. So for example, in my case, this could be file is, and then you put the entire path like so. It really is up to you whether you choose option 1 or option 2. However, bear in mind that Mplus does not read sentences longer than 90 characters, so if your path is very long, it might not be able to read the data file for you. Personally, I prefer to just copy-paste my data file in all of the folders where I have the input files that rely on it. So I'm going to put a little exclamation mark in front of this, because when you do, it means it is now an annotation or comment, so Mplus doesn't see it. So in this case, I don't have to delete it, we can just keep it there, but Mplus won't see that command, and it will only rely on this command here. The next command is the variable section. This includes multiple subsections, the first of which is the names are subsection. In this section, you would put all the names of the variables, and they have to be in the exact same order as they appear in your dataset. In this bit of the input, you are still linking your data file to your input file, in the sense that you are now identifying what each column in your data file represents. So you can see here that the first column represents the ID variable. The second column is for gender. The third one is for conflict, and so on and so forth. There are other ways to write this. In fact, with Mplus there are quite a few different ways to write some of these commands. I am only teaching you one way here, but in some of the other input files that I will present in other videos, you will have alternative writing styles. For now, what I have done is I have put each name on a single row, and at the end I closed with a semicolon. I sometimes use this style when I want to actually explain what each variable means. This makes it quite easy to then put a comment, perhaps with a full item label or something similar. But remember that all of these are part of a single statement, so only at the end you would have the semicolon, not for each one of them. This is kind of like a sentence. You have a verb here, and this is the end of the sentence, just like you would say it in English. Underneath this section, where you have now identified which column in your data file represents which construct, you have the use variables section. This is where you tell Mplus which variables you are selecting from your dataset to use in the current model. So in this case, I have selected conflict, stress, perceived parenting competence, and child externalizing problems. I have not selected ID, gender, or the categorical version of child externalizing problems. Now, in the use variables section, it doesn't matter which order you put the variables in. However, in the names are section, it is critical that you use the exact same order as you had them in the data file, because otherwise Mplus will label them wrongly. So just remember that for names are, it is absolutely essential that all of the variables appear in the same order as the data file, whereas in use variables it doesn't matter. Now in the variable section you have other things you might wish to put. So for example, maybe you want to use just some observations from your dataset, just maybe a subgroup of people. So there are many other things that could come in here, but we are not going to use those features just yet. In order to specify missing data, you would use the missing R command. Now, in my case, I have said missing are all minus 99. What this means is that if I have any missing data on any of the variables, it will have been coded with the code minus 99, because this is what I will have used in my dataset. It is important in your dataset to not leave blanks if you have missing data, but to first code that data with some kind of number. I usually use a large negative number, because if I forget to put this command here, Mplus will give me very strange results if my missing value is something large and negative. Now at the end of that statement, you again have to close with a semicolon. If you only have missingness on one or two of the variables, let's say maybe just these two, then instead of the keyword all, you could just put those variables there. However, I always just put missing are all and always make sure I called all of my missing data with the same value, because if there is no missingness, Mplus will just tell me that there were no cases with missing data, and then I'm okay. So this is usually the command that I use. Now we reach the fun part, the model command. For that, I'm going to reopen the diagram on the right hand side so we can remember what it is we're supposed to specify, and we will try to do it together.